Welcome inside the RX Muscle Studios. This is Ask Dave, better known as #AskDave, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Go to speciesnutrition.com. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. Glad you can join us on this Wednesday afternoon here on rxmuscle.com. If you're in the Northeast region, nice to see the weather finally warming up and for you to get out there and start to show off those gains that you've been working on all year long. Again, go to speciesnutrition.com. We have a whole line of products, everything laid out there, all the stacks, as well as a supplement guide on the home page. The game is simple. You can ask your questions for Dave Palumbo by using the Muscle Central forum on rxmuscle.com, tweeting the questions using #AskDave, asking questions on our Instagram handle, that is official_RxMuscle, or on our Facebook page. And with that, we bring in Dave Palumbo. Dave, big weekend coming up this weekend with the New York Pro in Teaneck, New Jersey tomorrow night. We're going to have the preview show right here on rxmuscle.com, a special episode of Heavy Muscle TV.
I'm confused, I got to be honest with you, because this is the first year they've ever had the New York Pro on a Sunday. And I don't know if there was a venue issue there. Obviously, it's going to be for the first time in Teaneck, New Jersey, which I love that Marriott there. I think it's a great venue. It's easy to park. It's easy to get to. It's easy to get out of there. There's places to eat around there. But, bodybuilding on Sunday, pro bodybuilding. That might be a first, or maybe not a first, but it's a rarity, that's for sure. And it certainly will make for interesting radio show following the show, because I know Chris Aceto will be there. I will be there. We'll be doing our wrap-up, and then we'll be heading back to the studio here to do our official RX Muscle Heavy Muscle Radio show. And, what's great about the New York Pro is, the old saying, as Sinatra said, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. Well, all the biggest, newest freaks always came to New York Pro first, and that's usually where they're showcased. Big Ramy won the last 2 years. Not a bigger freak on the planet than that guy. Juan Morel had to settle for second last year. I know he's looking to win it this year. Victor Martinez entering at the very last minute should make for an interesting competition. Obviously, you got Max Charles, who's probably the biggest freak in the sport right now. So it's going to be exciting this weekend, Plus, and obviously, you got women's physique, you got figure, bikini, and you got all the other divisions as well, men's physique. So it's going to be a busy weekend, but I like the pro shows that are only pro shows because, once again, I get to really, dig into the top competitors in the world.
So with that, you can ask your questions for Dave. Again, the Muscle Central Forum on rxmuscle.com. Our Instagram handle, official_RxMuscle. You can tweet your questions using #AskDave or on our Facebook page, as well as the live chat box on livestream.com. We're going to start at the Muscle Central Forum on rxmuscle.com. Our good friend Jeff Roberts. Dave, in regards to the Pittsburgh Pro guest posing lineup, did any of the physiques surprise you in a positive or negative way?
Jim Mannion always has the greatest lineup of guest posers. The top guys in the world show up there and pose. And, in the last couple of years, Kai has really shocked a lot of people and impressed a lot of people at multiple Pittsburghs. From what I heard, I wasn't there, obviously, and I saw some of the videos and the pictures. Phil Heath was really impressive because he might not have been as big as he normally is in the offseason, but he was very lean. And I think as bodybuilding fans, we like to see the guys that are in shape on stage. I think Phil is taking this year's Olympia very, very seriously. He knows it's not going to be a walk in the park. It was very close last year. And I think he's putting in his homework now so that when he gets to the show later, he doesn't have to play catch-up. And I think that Phil Heath was the most impactful person in that guest posing lineup.
Stick with the Muscle Central Forum and go to Mr. Dedication. Question about RX Muscle. Hey, Dave, would you let RX Muscle go back to how it used to be? I still love you and all, but just miss the old forum.
Well, nothing could ever go back the way it was. Everything is constantly always changing and evolving and moving forward. So, we have to go with the times and change with the times. What worked, in 2009 is not going to work today. Different crowd, different, plus I have different interests as well. The whole industry online has changed to the degree that, there's more people out there doing it. So what we're trying to do at RX Muscle now is do it better, more innovative. And that's why we really are putting a lot of our energy into the new TV programming that we're coming out with. Obviously, we have the Iron Debate Show, Fitness View, this show, Ask Dave, Heavy Muscle TV, obviously, which is our staple, and we have Behind the Muscle, and we have a couple new ones coming out. So that's really where I'm focusing my efforts, and I think where the RX Muscle website is focusing its efforts. Obviously, Heavy Muscle Radio will always be a staple every Monday night, and then, of course, we'll cover the big shows, but in a professional way.
Let's go to our Instagram handle. Again, if you want to ask a question on our Instagram handle, it is official_RX Muscle, and with that, we check in with Frost Hard Team Villa. Ask Dave. Dave, this show sucks. Got the memo. What are your thoughts on cutting water 2 days out of a competition?
I don't think that water should be cut for any more than about 24 hours. I think once you start going over 24 hours, you start facing the serious threat of going too flat on stage. Remember, the muscles are probably 90% water. So if you start dehydrating them for too long, no matter how many grams of carbs you got jammed in there, no matter how many grams of fat you got jammed in, they're not going to look full and round, okay? They just can't plump and round themselves off without that water. So it doesn't take more than 18 hours to get enough water out of from under your skin and dry your body out. Any more than that, and you know what? Now you're looking into dangerous territory of screwing up. So if you look great, like I always say a week out, the less you do, the better.
Let's go to Chadzamine. Hi, Dave. Your show sucks so bad, I'd rather chew on my toenails. Nice one. What are your thoughts on reverse dieting? Also, after being on a cut doing ketogenic diet, how would you go about reintroducing carbs after the cut? Thanks from Liam in Birmingham, UK.
Well, a lot of people ask me, after doing a very low carb diet, like, my ketogenic diet, how do you get back to eating, in an off season or a maintenance type of phase, or so to speak? And, the true answer is gradually, but I know after a show's over, the inclination, your desire is to go eat everything in sight. So I always tell people, enjoy yourself for a day or two, maybe even 3, and then get back onto the protein fat regimen, but add 35 grams of carbs to each meal, and do that for about a week to 4 weeks, until your body regulates itself. I always found as a bodybuilder, it took me 4 weeks at least to feel like a normal human being after a show, where your digestive tract is working again, where you're not retaining excessive amounts of fluid, where you don't feel tired all the time. People think after a week of going back to eating normal, you're going to feel fine. Usually you feel like crap for at least 4 weeks. So I would do something like that, a clean type of eating, maybe give yourself a cheat meal every 3 or 4 days, just to kind of, let yourself indulge a little bit. And then after 4 weeks, then you can start really redesigning what you want to do and how you want to eat. Ironically, 6 meals of protein and fat with carbs in it is really an off-season scenario as well. It just depends on how many grams of carbs you're really going to need, depending on your metabolism.
You're watching Ask Dave on RxMuscle.com, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Go to speciesnutrition.com. We stick on our Instagram page this question from Chris Tomaso. Hey, Dave, this show sucks so much, it makes me think CrossFit is a good idea. Nice. That's the kind of innovation that we've come to expect from the RX Muscle community. My lower back has a backwards curve to it. I really want to have a straight back. Is this caused by tightness in a certain group of muscles? How would you recommend I fix this? Thanks for doing this show, Dave.
A backwards curve is kind of like not a very descriptive term. Maybe he means a lordosis, or it's overcurved a little bit, or a kyphosis, but usually the lordosis refers to the lower spine. Usually a lot of that's genetic. My dad, as he got older and older, kind of hunched over more and became like a hunchback. And his mother, my grandmother, was like that too. So I'm like petrified that I'm going to get like hunched over too. So I'm like always trying to stick my chest out and improve my posture. When I go to the gym, I go on this machine where I can actually stretch backwards so I can keep my spine stretched. And I think that goes a long way. But I think as we get older, the spine kind of shrivels up a little bit. So you really have to work on your flexibility. And if you are noticing that your spine is getting a weird shape to it, you got to stretch. You might even need someone else to stretch you. Chiropractic manipulations, massage is a good idea. Don't let it get to the point where you can't fix it anymore. So if you're noticing it, act on it. Stretching is the best thing I can recommend.
Let's go to our Facebook page. Again, our official Facebook page for RX Muscle. We go to Mark Foltz. Dave, I hate your show so much, I'd rather have Nicole Bass fart on my face. Did you see the video of George Farah crying like I'll say baby, about Chris Aceto? What is your take on it, and is Farah just being let's just not repeat that on air.
Yeah, I if you listen to Heavy Muscle Radio this last week, Chris and I did a pretty good number on Farah. I actually like the guy. If I hang out with him, he's amusing. I find him amusing. I don't really take him too seriously, but I don't think he has bad intentions. But then again, maybe he does have bad intentions because I was with Triple H this past weekend, WWE Superstar Triple H, and we were going over his diet, and he told me, hey, just out of curiosity, I just let you find this amusing. At the Arnold Classic, George Farah came up to me and he was like, Triple H, I will help you look like The Rock. You see what I do for Rock? I do that for you. So he basically tried to steal my client from me, knowing that I work with Triple H. So maybe George's intentions aren't good. I don't know what his problem is. He's got a lot of great clients. He makes good money. I don't understand what the problem is. Why he lies about things and why he tries to steal people's clients. But that's him. I accept everyone for who they are.
We'll stick with our Facebook page. Question from Wayne Crandell. This show sucks. I was just wondering, Dave, if you were still going to write a book.
Yeah, I'll tell you something on the book update. It's interesting that you mentioned that. I started updating my SMART training manual. For those of you who don't know, I have it's called SMART Personal Training Certification. I certify personal trainers. It's online. And you can go online, you download the books, and you take the test, and then you get a certificate. And I've been doing this for about 18 years now. I've certified probably thousands and thousands of people. But every once in a while, I sit down and I update the book. So I'm doing a 2015 edition now, which should be out shortly. It's really good. I've updated all the new supplements and a lot of great new stuff. Even if you have the old book or if you did the old course, you might want to do this one just because it's so much great information. Once I started writing again and writing about this stuff, I said, I'm going to keep going. So I'm actually working on, after this, I'm going to work on a SMART class Part 2, or I guess you could say Level 2 class, which is going to deal exclusively with detoxification. I might even give it in person too, for probably be about $50 or $60 a person, and I'll teach that. And this way, if you have the SMART certification, you can kind of renew using that Level 2 class. And then I'm going to take that and I'm going to go on a little further, and I'm going to write the diet book I've always wanted to. I think I finally figured out in my mind how I want to do it, and since I've started writing again, I got the juices going, so I better act now. So it is a possibility within the next 6 months I might have a book finished.
You're watching Ask Dave on RxMuscle.com, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Visit speciesnutrition.com. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. We go back to our Facebook page and check in with Raymond Rieger. So, Dave, Raymond has a riddle he wants to ask you.
Okay.
Hey, Dave, what's the difference between a vacuum and RX Muscle?
They both suck.
After 5 years, RX Muscle will still suck. Very nice. Dave, I recently finished a 10-week cycle of Test E at 750 milligrams a week, DECA 600 a week, EQ 600 a week. What would you advise in terms of PCT length and dosages when it pertains to compounds such as Clomid HCG and Nolvadex?
I've said it before, I'll say it again. This is the most asked question I've gotten throughout my career. People are obsessed with post-cycle therapy, PCT, knowing what to do when they come off a steroid cycle. I don't know why. I put it out there so much. I don't know why people find this so confusing. It's really not hard. Look, the problem is when you're taking an anabolic steroid cycle, what you're doing is you're shutting down your testicular function, the production of testosterone from your testicles. That's because the pituitary hormones in your brain, LH and FSH, these are the hormones that stimulate your testicles to produce testosterone, have been turned off. So what do we do? The first step you want to do is you want to re-stimulate the testicles to start working again. And the best thing to do is to take HCG for that, which is human chorionic gonadotropin. It mimics the pituitary hormone LH, or luteinizing hormone, and it basically tells the testicles produce testosterone. And usually the dosage I recommend the guys use is about 2,000 units every third day for about anywhere from 5 to 7 in shots, which should take you about 2 to 3 weeks on that. After that, you want to do what we use a compound known as Clomid or clomiphene. You could also use Nolvadex or tamoxifen. Those two work kind of similar. What they do is they block estrogen receptors. Clomid, I think, does it a little better because it blocks estrogen receptors in the brain or the hypothalamus pituitary area, and it doesn't allow the pituitary gland to be shut down. What it basically is doing is releasing the hold on the pituitary gland and letting the pituitary gland start producing LH again, which is what we want because that LH is going to keep the testicles producing the testosterone. So we stimulate the testicles with HCG, then the LH stimulates the testicles, and then throughout that whole PCT time, you want to take something that will block estrogen production because estrogen screws everything up. It shuts down the whole process. And usually I recommend a 0.5 milligram of Arimidex every other day to every day, or 2.5 milligrams of Femara every day to every other day. And that combination for about 6 weeks, the 3 weeks on HCG, 3 weeks on the Clomid or Nolvadex, tends to turn everything back on in an ideal world. Of course, we don't live in an ideal world.
You're watching Ask Dave on rxmuscle.com. We go to our Twitter feed. Again, if you want to tweet a question, use the hashtag AskDave. And we check in with Tony Washington at _Tony Washington. Dave, Kai was smaller, leaner, and more separated at the Pit Pro than usual. Think it's to avoid a huge weight drop, fullness, and water issue?
Kai always looks great in Pittsburgh. Kai is Mr. Olympia in Pittsburgh usually every year. The problem is he tends to get bigger as he gets to the Olympia and more out of shape. I don't know why that is. If he just maintained what he was doing at the Pittsburgh, he'd probably be Mr. Olympia this year. So every year I see it happen. Chris Cecito and I knock our heads against the wall and we're like, I don't understand. This guy looks so good at Pittsburgh, and then he shows up at the Olympia and he's too big and he's bloated, or he's holding water, or something just doesn't look right. It's almost like he's trying to do too much. I think with Kai, because he's such a genetic freak and he's so genetically talented, less is better. I think he looked better when he was just first coming up, and I think that's because now he has the money to do what he needs to do, and I think he's overdoing it. That's my theory. Whether it's right or not remains to be seen.
We check in with the Muscle Central Forum on rxmuscle.com. Again, if you're not already a member, it is free to register, rxmuscle.com. And we check in with Kel. Kel asks, how much phosphorus is in Isolyze per serving?
I have no. Let's look at the container here. I don't think there's any phosphorus, to tell you the truth. I'd have to look that up for you, Kel. There's no added phosphorus, that's for sure. So for whatever in the whey isolate is what's in there, it's not very high.
Let's check in with the Dutchman on Muscle Central Forum. Dear Dave, I just want to say that I hate your freaking show. Cancel this shit. All right. I am beginning my very first cycle soon and starting with Test E 500 milligrams. Should I inject it 2 times, 250 milligrams per week, or once at 500 milligrams per week? Now I know that it's already a long-lasting oil, but I hear different options, or rather different opinions. What's your take on it? And then he goes on to ask, and is Test E alone enough for first time, or should I already begin to stack it? I have a feeling my receptors might get an overload.
While theoretically test enanthate or testosterone enanthate has a very long half-life in the blood because it releases very evenly and very slowly, theoretically, it doesn't really happen practically in real life. So you're better off splitting your shots into at least 2 or 3 injections per week, because then you're going to get better peak levels, because then the peak levels are going to kind of go like this, and every couple of days you're going to get another peak. I find that gives you more consistent blood levels than when you take 1 shot a week, because what happens when you take 1 shot a week is usually at about midweek you get a nice peak, and then toward the end, before you're ready to take your next shot, your levels are low. So rather than get those swings, if you split the shots up into 2 or 3 shots throughout the week, even though it's the same amount, it seems to be assimilated better. That's my thinking. And I think he wanted to know something about stacking the compounds. Obviously, when you're trying to maximize gains, if you stack 2 anabolic steroids together, they work better than just 1 + 1 = 2. It's like 1 + 1 = 5. I've said this before. They have some kind of an exponential or augmenting effect on each other. Now, people will say, well, what if I add a 3rd and 4th compound? You don't seem to get that same benefit as the 1 and 1. Okay, probably 3 compounds will give you the maximum kick you can get from mixing different compounds together. But when you definitely mix two, you see a much better effect from just one.
You're watching Ask Dave on RxMuscle.com. A reminder, tomorrow night, 8 p.m., special episode of Heavy Muscle TV, a full preview of the New York Pro Show this Sunday in New Jersey. We go back to our Instagram page. Again, our Instagram handle is official_RxMuscle. This question from Jan Met. Hi, Dave. I hate this show. Any plans on doing a seminar in Denmark?
Before I answer that, you mentioned Instagram. And, I mentioned last week and a couple times before that, I said, if you guys really like the show and you want to support it, like us. And you know what?
If you really hate the show.
Or if you hate the show, like us too. We don't care. Matter of fact, if you hate the show, like us twice. And tell all your friends. But when you guys do that, I noticed a surge in people liking us, and I want to just thank you guys for supporting the show. Obviously, Sid and I and Johnny put a lot of time into doing this show every week, and we want to give you guys great information. So I appreciate it if you guys like us on Facebook, like us on Instagram, and always tweet us your questions, because that just shows us that you're supporting what we're doing. Getting back to Denmark, I would do a seminar in Denmark if I got enough people. I'm doing obviously my hardcore seminar. I have 2 planned right now. I have one here on May 23rd in this RX Muscle office here. We have almost a full class, so there's a couple spots left. You can register at davepalumbo.com for the hardcore seminar. It's how to become a diet guru seminar, It's a 10-hour class. It's going to involve me explaining, how to structure diets, how to create supplement plans, drug cycles, pre-contest carb depletion, carbing up, diuretics. It's going to cover everything. You're going to learn how to become a diet coach, essentially. Even if you don't want to be a diet coach, you're going to learn all the information involved. And I think it's going to give you way better insights into the science of how the body works. And I'm only doing a couple of these because it's a very emotionally draining for me to teach these classes. And I can't have a big class because there's too many people that suck me dry on those classes. So I'm limiting it to 20 overseas, but 10 or 12 here in New York, because it's going to be a big class here. I know already we are almost maxed out. But you guys can sign up for the May 23rd class. If you want to sign up in Sydney, Australia, I will be there on June 13th. That's Saturday. You can contact Chris Schmidt on Facebook, and he's organizing that class for me. I think we have a couple seats left there too, so you might want to act quickly if you want to be in that class. That's going to be a great one. I love Australia. But I would do one in Denmark, but the person would have to contact me. We'd have to set up a class, and I have to have enough people because I got to pay my airfare, hotel, and food. It's got to be worth my time. Because, like I said, it is very draining. And a lot of people have been asking me, Sid, too, are we going to videotape this and release it? I will not be videotaping it. This is a one-on-one experience. It's not like a seminar where I'm just talking. There's going to be a lot of interaction from the people who are in the class asking questions. I really encourage that. It's more of a teaching environment. So, guys, if you don't show up in person, you're not going to get the advantage of this class. It's really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I wish that someone had done this back in the day when I was first coming up, because I'm going to save a lot of people a lot of time, and I'm going to make people really great coaches. You guys, there's a lot of guys out there that are coaching people that don't really have the knowledge that they really feel that they need. They don't understand the science. This is right up your alley, guys. Sign up.
Let's go back to our Instagram page again, official_RX Muscle. Let's go to, again, we always talk about the creativity that you, the RX Muscle watchers, viewers, listeners, exhibit when you talk about how much you hate this show. This one may take the cake. This one is from Princess Juicy _DDS. Dave, I'd rather pack my anus full of M80s and squat over a flaming hibachi than watch your abortion of a show. That might be the best one ever. The rest of you have a lot of catching up to do. I'm on the Palumbo diet right now. I love cheese and was wondering if I could eat no-carb varieties, perhaps as a substitute for the peanut butter with the shakes.
There's really very few no-carb varieties of cheese. And, cheese... there's dairy in there, and I have a problem with too much dairy, especially because there is a little bit of lactose in cheese. I guess if you could tolerate the cheese, theoretically, you can use it. I wouldn't call it an ideal source of fat, just because it's like milk fat. But I guess if you did it once, maybe one meal out of the day, you probably can get away with it.
I'll stick with the Instagram handle. Let's go to James Copesell. Dave, I'd rather... Wow, I'm definitely not saying that one over air. Can you provide insight on if pros really come off cycle or just down to maintenance doses?
I think a lot of pros don't come off cycle, and that's the God honest truth. And I think that's a huge problem. And while I'll never mention names, I have a lot of guys that have been competing for a long time contact me and have problems with kidney function and liver function and heart function and blood sugar levels because of years and years of not coming off. And I think that look, the sport is not a race. It's not a sprint. It's a long distance race. Bodybuilding it takes a long time to really become a great athlete in. And if you're going to be in this a long time, you got to have a strategy. You got to figure out how you're going to keep yourself healthy while you're putting all this muscle on and while you're growing and dieting and all that stuff. And I think that coming off cycle at least once a year for 10 to 12 weeks is part of the process. And if you can't incorporate that into the process, then you have mental problems, and that you need to find someone who's going to be able to explain to you how to do it properly so you won't lose a ton of muscle, and how to deal with it mentally, because it is part of the process, especially if you want to have a productive and long life following your bodybuilding competition.
You're watching Ask Dave on RxMuscle.com. Reminder, special episode of Heavy Muscle TV tomorrow night, full preview of the New York Pro Show. And then, of course, this weekend, we are going to have a wall-to-wall coverage of the New York Pro. Dave Palumbo, Johnny Styles are going to be all over the place doing interviews, so you're not going to want to miss that. Stay tuned to RxMuscle.com. We stay with the Instagram handle. This question from Real Young Kobe Bryant. Dave, first of all, I want to tell you that I hate this badass show. What is your opinion on those quote-unquote natural bodybuilding shows? That's the first question. Second, what is the best time frame to eat a protein source? Every 2 hours, 3 hours? And will my body burn muscle when I do not eat in this time frame?
First, let me address the eating, because I think that's a more relevant question. When I was competing, or even when I was off season, I would eat every hour to hour and a half, because I had such a fast metabolism that if I didn't feed myself that frequently, I wouldn't gain weight. That doesn't mean that I was losing muscle if I didn't eat every hour. It just means I wouldn't gain muscle. Some guys, if they do that, will be fat slobs, okay? So the ideal window is, depending on your metabolism, is usually about an hour and a half to about 3.5 hours. You don't want to go more than 3.5 hours. Women can get away on the 3.5 hour mark. Men usually are better at 2.5 hours. Because when you start going longer than that, that's when you're not going to maximize your gains. But let's look at how a meal works. When you break down food, your body assimilates protein at 8 grams per hour. So if you eat a meal that has 64 grams of protein in it, it takes 8 hours to absorb all that protein. So you're never going to not have something trickling into your bloodstream, even if you went 8 hours without eating. But once again, we want to maximize the anabolic environment. In order to do that, you should probably be consuming food every hour and a half to 2.5 hours as a man, every 2.5 to maybe 3.5 hours as a woman. It seems to be adequate. And if you follow that scheduling, I guess you could say you're going to maximize your results or your muscle gains. Now, getting back to the original question, I think, which was
natural bodybuilding shows, yeah.
Look, I've been to natural bodybuilding shows where guys weren't natural. So I've been to natural bodybuilding shows where they've actually excluded a guy who I knew was natural because they said he failed a polygraph test, and the guy weighed 140 pounds. I don't know what they thought he was taking. He just was like in really good shape, and there was some argument the guy had with one of the promoters. So look, there's politics and everything, and there's corruption and everything. The national organization is what it is, and they have their own little group of people who compete, and then you have the the NPC and the IFBB, which is the top bodybuilding organization in the world with the best athletes. So it depends where you want to compete. You want to compete in the big leagues, in the ocean, or you want to compete in the little pond with the smaller people. Some people like to start in the pond and then move into the big ocean, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I think that the key is that the fact that we have such a passion for the sport, and there's so many organizations and people out there that are trying to accomplish the same thing, that's great. That's good for what we're trying to accomplish. It means that the lifestyle is something that a lot of people are being captivated by, and there's money out there to be made, and I'm all in for of everything, as long as it's for the sport.
Let's go back to the Muscle Central Forum on RxMuscle.com. Again, if you're not already a member, it is free to register. You can also check out all our contest galleries, which are going to be populated weekend after weekend over the next few coming months. We check in with Vic B. Hi, Dave. What are your thoughts on, my apologies if I'm mispronouncing this, Glucophage, and in parentheses, metformin? This drug is believed by some to have anti-aging benefits, increased lifespan, and even has anti-cancer properties. Does metformin have any use for bodybuilders? And if so, how would you recommend a bodybuilder use metformin?
Yeah, metformin or glucophage, it was originally a diabetic drug, and I'll explain how it works in a second. But yeah, there has been some, I've read in Life Extension magazine, I'm a big Life Extension guy, that there has been some supposed benefits to, curing cancer, leading to longevity by stimulating like SERT receptors and stuff like that. But, I'm always skeptical of putting any foreign body like drug into your body and trying to induce something, because there's always side effects and ramifications. Now, people who are type 2 diabetics, which are diabetics that produce insulin from their beta pancreatic cells, but they don't produce enough. So what happens is their blood sugars get high. Now, the problem with high blood sugar is that it can accumulate in the eyes, the extremities, so you can get, you can need, amputations at some point because of poor circulation. Your eyes, you can lose your vision. Your kidneys, can get damaged by the high glucose levels. So we don't want high glucose. So a lot of times the doctor's knee-jerk response is put the person on Glucophage, because Glucophage makes the liver produce less glucose, which means you need less insulin, but it also forces the pancreas to produce more insulin. The problem with that is that when you make your pancreas work harder, you could burn out or destroy the cells in there. So sometimes when they give Glucophage, because people have high blood sugars, they actually make the situation worse long term, because the pancreas gets worse and destroys itself because it's being overworked or overtaxed. A better solution, which I know a lot of people are doing now, is what's called insulin management. It's like if in people with slightly high blood sugar, give a little bit of a long-acting or basal insulin to keep the needs or reduce the needs of the body to have to crank out extra insulin. So taking Glucophage, in my mind, because it overtaxes the pancreas, is probably not a good thing to do long term. I wouldn't advise it.
We stick with the Muscle Central Forum on rxmuscle.com, and whenever we get these kind of questions from the United Kingdom, I always try to envision it in a British accent. So you know what? I'm not going to read it in a British accent. I'm going to ask a question.
Come on, do it in a British accent.
Oh, I'd be terrible at that. I do watch enough British soccer, though I still can't do the accent. All right. Question from GP King 100. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this saying here in the UK, but the only words that can describe your show is piss poor. So however you want to translate that in the British tongue, go right for it. I wonder if you have any plans to invite Scott Connolly on any of the RX Muscle TV or radio shows soon. I used to love hearing him on Heavy Muscle Radio with you and John back in the day. Do you still keep in touch with him? What's he up to?
It's funny you mentioned Scott Connolly, because I was thinking about him the other day, because he had developed a kid's cereal that was like super low in sugar and high in protein, and I was thinking about it the other day because I thought that would be great. Now I'm big into kid nutrition now. I'm really like, in my mind, I'm trying to the wheels are turning, and I'm trying to figure out how to come out with some kids nutrition products, because I think that the youth of America is greatly malnourished and they eat terribly. And so I probably will get in touch with Scott. Scott and I email back and forth, maybe every couple weeks. I ask him a question here, he answers it, just because I don't really have anyone that I could ask. Like you guys ask me all your questions. I need someone who I could ask questions to also when I'm not sure of something. And Scott is my go-to guy, because I think he might be the smartest man that I know living on this earth right now, especially when it relates to protein metabolism or anything in the nutrition field. So I'll try to get Scott back on. I think that might be a great idea. Maybe if he's in the New York area at some point, we can get him to come into the studios. If not, worst case, we'll get him back on the radio.
Let's go back to the Instagram page. This question from Frost Hard Team Ville A. Dave, your predictions for the New York Pro Physique Division, men's physique division.
That's a tough one. I guess if you're a betting man, you probably would want to go with the guy who won in Pittsburgh. But, I like Logan Franklin. I got to tell you, he's the guy who won the Nationals last year. He didn't do so great in Pittsburgh, but I think he's going to come back with a much better look for New York. I don't know if Matt Acton is doing it. I think Matt Acton isn't it. I think Matt Acton's the guy to beat, or the guy. It's really his show to lose. I think he came in Pittsburgh really flat and washed out. I think he's going to come back better too. I like those two guys. Those are my picks: Matt Acton and Logan Franklin.
Let's go to the live stream, live chat box. We'll take a couple of more questions. This question is from Google's. I asked a question last week as well. And again, I preface this by saying that we did bring this up last week, and this is about Ramadan. And we did say that Dave would make a video that we would have for the Muslim community that will be fasting during the month. So the question is about keto. Do I start my keto diet if Ramadan is coming soon? If yes, do I stay on it during the month of Ramadan?
Well, if we're going to figure out, I've written Ramadan diets for people, by the way, in the past. I have a lot of clients who follow Ramadan, and I've figured out, we've structured when you got to eat, when you're not. Unfortunately, it's going to require you waking up in the middle of the night, possibly, and or going to bed a little later than normal. The key is, obviously, you want to eat. You can only eat when it's dark, so you got to figure out a schedule of eating. But what you eat really is irrelevant. So, if you want to diet during Ramadan, you can do a ketogenic diet just as easily as you can do a carb diet. There's really no reason why you couldn't do one or the other. So I think it's just a matter of managing your time, trying to get that first meal in as soon as the sun goes down, and then hit it every 2 hours right after that, or even an hour and a half after that. Try to get your 6 feedings in, or at least 4 or 5 feedings before you go to bed, and then maybe, get up in the middle of the night and have an extra meal. Usually what I find with the guys in Ramadan, we can get 5 meals in. The truly neurotic, great ones will get 6 in, but 5 is usually doable. 4 before you go to bed, 1 in the middle of the night. And that tends to work. Obviously, it's not ideal if you're dieting for a show during that period of time, but now, Sid, maybe you can answer this better. I've heard that there's rules that you can actually push Ramadan back a month if you want, or something like that, and do it a month later. Is that true?
Well, it's like anything else. This question always comes up with professional soccer players, because in Europe, there are many top-end professional soccer players that are Muslim as well. And this debate always comes up. As a matter of fact, during this past summer, the World Cup, there were many Muslims that were fasting, and it was a debate. Some were, some weren't. Like anything else, there are exceptions for strenuous activity, especially when it is your profession, your livelihood, essentially. So, again, it's one of those things that there is some gray area as to what circumstances. Like for women, for instance, women that are sick, that are pregnant, essentially they're excused from fasting. Those who are sick or unable to fast or handicapped, they're excused from fasting. But in cases where fair enough, it's your profession, this is your livelihood, there is gray area, but, again, it's one of those things where you're excused in a manner where you're able to make it up later down the road.
Gotcha.
So let's wrap up with a couple of more. I wanted to get this one in from Grant Hamo, this one from our Instagram page. Hi, Dave. This show is so bad, I have to wash my ears out with bleach after every time I watch. Nice. How do you go about adding in cardio when you're dieting someone for a show, and how would you know if they were doing too much or too little?
Well, I usually start people off at about 4 times a week at 20 minutes for the men, usually the women 5 times a week. And I see how their body responds. I put them on a diet, I give them a plan, and I see if they start losing weight. If they don't lose weight, the first thing I always do is up the cardio a little bit. So I might go from 3 days or 4 days a week to 4 or 5 days a week. If that helps, then great. So I kind of judge it by, now I have had guys where I put on 3 days a week of cardio and they started losing weight too fast. I had to take all the cardio away from them, or I had to up their food. So that's the whole great thing about coaching. It's my job to use my intuition as a coach, because I've been doing this for 25 years, to know what the variables are that I change. That's why I can give you a diet, Sid, and I can give Johnny a diet, and it might be a very similar diet because you guys weigh similar, but I might modify Johnny's completely differently than I modify yours, because you guys have different metabolism, different dietary needs, and your bodies respond differently to what I'm giving you to do. So while it looks like it might be a similar diet, it evolves into something different, and that's where coaching expertise comes in. That's why I can't tell people, I can't give people a blanket statement that will say this will work, because it won't. For some people it will. And you know what? When I put these generalized template diets out there for everyone to look at, a lot of guys just follow it and it works great for them. Probably 80% of the people it'll work for, but not the 20% that are trying to get on stage and tweak their physique to the point of 0% body fat.
Time for our final question of the show from a good friend of the show, Team 3CC Carlos. A 2-part question. Dave can't stress this enough. This show sucks. Dave, who's been some of your most famous clients, and is there anything, well, again, it's a two-part question, essentially 2.5-part question. So, I'm going to cut the second part of the question because he does go on to ask about, it's a good point he makes. Dave, maybe the show sucks because your advice sucks, LOL, just kidding. How about some free giveaways to listeners like Species Supplements in the future? Or since I came up with the idea, give me some of that whey isolate protein. So let's address that question and then also some of your most famous clients.
I think that's a good idea. I think we should do some giveaways, Sid. Maybe we'll come up with some most creative I like hate that. The show.
Yes.
Best question of the Ask Dave. So why don't we next week we're going to give away two prizes. So when you guys post your questions, you might have to post your address, or we might have to get back to you and ask for your address if we pick you. The best why I hate the show and the best question of the week will get a free something. We'll give you whether a free Species gym bag, maybe free samples, a tub of ice. I'll depend what it is. Every week I'll come up with a different freebie, a bottle of Mac oil. And just because you guys are participating so well, but the same person can't win every single week, though. So don't, I'm just warning you guys. Unless you guys are that creative, I don't know. Now, what was the question again?
Well, the question was, who's been some of your most famous clients?
Well, I think a lot of people know. I talk about them all the time. Triple H, obviously, and his wife Stephanie McMahon are probably the two, I guess you could say, most famous people because everyone watches WWE. I've actually done the diet of Linda McMahon too, Stephanie's mom, and I know Vince McMahon uses all the Species supplements. So they're probably the most famous Species people. Obviously, another one of my great clients is Chris Angel, the magician. Probably, I don't know if he's as famous as Triple H, but he's definitely on par with him. So he was great. I almost started working with Louis Anderson, the comedian, too, because he's friends with Chris Angel, but he doesn't like to diet. He likes to be fat. So it didn't really work out. Ryan Reynolds, the actor, uses isolized protein. My friend Bobby Strom trains him, and I give him advice. And Mickey Rourke used Species nutrition products and a diet I had written for him for a lot of for the wrestler and a couple of the movies he did after that. So, I think the actors really like, and I know Lorenzo Orozco has a lot of the athletes using his clients using the Species line. I think a lot of people like the diet advice and the Species line because it's a very high-end line, and actors want the best quality stuff they can put in their body because when they got to get ready for a role, they got to look their best. They don't want to mess around and get stomach aches or upset stomachs or whatever the case may be.
That's going to do for this episode, but I'm looking at this list of questions, and we have about, I kid you not, 35 unanswered questions, and that is just a credit to you, the RX Muscle community. We thank you so much for the support and watching, and again, these are questions we're going to start with on the next episode. We've discussed, moving the show live on YouTube. We've discussed moving the show to an hour format. If that's what we need to do to accommodate getting your questions in on this show, then that's something that we're going to definitely consider going forward. But again, we can't stress enough the appreciation for all your support in this show and all the shows that we provide for you here on rxmuscle.com. Special thanks to our producer, Johnny Styles, doing an excellent job as always. Reminder, tomorrow night, Heavy Muscle TV special episode as we preview the New York Pro. We have some guests coming in studio, Renee Schmidt, Chris Schmidt. I believe we might be joined, don't quote us yet, don't go running around saying this, Yorishna Ayala from Puerto Rico might be live in studio
Karina Nascimento,
of course, she's confirmed.
The Brazilian bombshell. You can't forget her.
Confirmed to be live here in studio tomorrow night, and you never know who else is going to drop by. We're going to be negotiating.
Ayana Carroll.
You know what? There you go.
Ayana Carroll will be Skyping in. She's going to be doing the New York Pro. She just won the Orlando Europa Women's Physique category, trained by my good friend Arthur Gooden. She will be Skyping in for sure tomorrow. So, again, between now and tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to see who else we can get in. It's going to be a jam-packed show, including analysis, live preview with Dave and possibly Lonnie Tieper, an industry expert. Again, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. here on Heavy Muscle TV on rxmuscle.com. And this weekend, full coverage of the New York Pro Show. We'll see you next week. Have a good day.